study this morning, and we're going to begin Leviticus chapter 4. And, of course, Leviticus has to do with the Levitical priesthood and some of the commandments and things that they were given by God through Moses as to carry out these different sacrifices of the priesthood, not only for the priests themselves, but also for the sins and trespasses of the people. And there can even be sins that they do unaware to them, and when they become aware of it, then they are to go and make a sacrifice. So we're going to get into sins of presumption, sins of ignorance, and things of that nature as this unfolds. So it's very interesting and very detailed. If we've never taken a very close look at it, you're going to find that God has a specific pattern and plan that He wants for each of these sacrifices. One of the things that we're going to notice too, and I'll start to notice, sometimes it's a young bull, right? And it can be because of the economic status of people, grain, or it can be turtle doves, or it can be pigeons and things of that nature. But we're going to notice something in this lesson today, that He's going to make a transition in what is required of that sacrifice. Like we said, sometimes it can be either male or female, as we talked last week. Well, our goat. Well, we're going to see that when it comes to God's hierarchy, and I think Reed talked about that last week, that you're going to see a little bit of transition in the sins of the priest and the sins of a ruler and the sins of the congregation. And there's going to be a reason for that. So there's a lot of things that we're going to see here that God is going to show us, that He keeps His hierarchy or structure in line, even today. And as we said before, we could take any part of this and we could stay on it week after week, month after month, because these are lessons within their own selves. And I picked out a few things that jumped out, and I'm sure as you read through this, you're going to pick up a few things that jump out. Well, one of the things that becomes quite obvious is the physical, or the type and shadow of that which is to come, is very evident in this, okay? You can see this carried out over and over in the thoughts of God. One of the things that really jumps out, and maybe we don't talk about enough when we talk about the Old Law and the Old Testament, is, as we've already seen, what did God always consider first before the sacrifice? The heart. The heart. And you know, that's even showed forth in, and we use this a lot, in God's dealing with King Saul and Samuel. When He makes a statement, it's better to obey. And where does obedience come from? The heart, than to sacrifice. Well, if the heart's right, sacrificing comes automatically, doesn't it? Ryan?
That's also translated into the New Testament too, where Ananias and Sapphira, when they brought their stuff, they could have brought whatever they wanted, but their heart was that they had been in the deceitful place of their heart, and that's why they were punished.
Exactly.
Because they held back.
Exactly.
They were held, it was because they were punished and struck dead because of the manner in which they.
Exactly. Right, so where does that all go back? The heart. So when you look at God's thought pattern on this, in the overall scheme of things, you have to ask yourself a question: where did the thought pattern ever change? Okay? One was physical, and it had to be, because what had to come to become the perfect sacrifice? Jesus Christ. Okay? Once that sacrifice was given and made, then what happened? The transition to more into the spiritual. All these things were absorbed into the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. You can see the perfect lamb, the perfect young bull, if you will, the turtle dove, and it all was absorbed into Him and His shed blood. That's why He could say that He came to fulfill the law and not change the law. You know, He also said not one jot or tittle of the law will pass away but be fulfilled by Him. See? So this is what we're seeing here. This is a roadmap, if you will, at how we got here into the New Testament, into the church, and even where we're at today. This is our roadmap. This was in the plan. This is God's program of this. And I must say, as you get into this and you dig around in it, and depend upon how deep you want to dig into it, I sure am glad God was giving these instructions to Moses directly, and Moses giving it to them, and somewhere around in the wandering, all this was written down. I can tell you right now, Bobby couldn't keep up with it, okay? Because of the detail of it, the structure of it, the carrying out of it. And as Ryan said, it had to be to God's specification, you know? Hey, if you left one thing out or you neglected to do another, well, it became sin. And now you had to offer an offering for the negligence, okay? And things of that nature. And we're going to see that as this unfolds. So, Leviticus chapter 4 is where we're at. And what are some of the conversations in this chapter that we're going to be looking at? Well, one of the things that we're going to be looking at, a sin offering of ignorance for the priest, okay? Thought that was real interesting that, yes, even the priest can sin, okay? We're going to be looking at what about the congregation at large? What about an offering for the congregation at large? What about for the ruler, okay? Yes, even the ruler of the people can sin, okay? And what about for the people in general, okay, for their everyday sin? So there's a whole lot to cover here in Leviticus chapter 4 with these things. So what we're going to do, we're going to take bits and pieces of it and probably read verses 1 through 13, and then we'll go back and see what we can kind of glean out of those verses. And by the way, I am using the King James Version. I use the ESV as reference. In the back of my mind, I've been thinking about changing over to the ESV in a lot of this. But I don't know, kind of a traditionalist, I guess, yeah, keeping with the KJV, you know, so I do use both. And I use others too. Not only that, New King James, New International Version, stuff like that. So I do use other translations of this, but kind of stick with this. And so I just wanted to throw that out there that's what I'm looking at this. So we done a little word study last week. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit. When you look at the King James and the English Standard and some others, you have to go back and kind of look at some of the words and how they're structured and what they meant at that time versus how we apply them today. So all that has to be taken in consideration. Now, with all that being said, this is good to know. Do I have to know this to be saved? Not really. It's good to know. It adds to your faith, okay? But as long as I understand that Jesus' blood was shed for the remission of sins of many, and I confess him that he is the Son of God, and are baptized and a faithful member of the church, am I saved? Yes, I am. But study leads you back to this, you know. This is why the apostle Paul said to the young gospel preachers, study to show thyself approved, a workman that need not be ashamed. It does give you a better understanding of it, okay, of what is going on here. So with that being said, we'll kind of move on. Bobby, Leviticus chapter 4, how about read first verses 1 through 4?
Okay, I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, if anyone sins unintentionally in any of the Lord's commandments about the things not to be done, and does any one of them, if it is the anointed priest who sins, thus bringing guilt on the people, then he shall offer for the sin that he has committed a bull in the herd without blemish to the Lord for a sin offering. He shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of the meeting before God, or before the Lord, and lay his hand on the head of the bull and kill the bull before the Lord.
Okay. One of the things that you notice right off the bat is if a soul shall sin. You know, we talked about the 4 or 5 different categories we're going to look at. We find that as this chapter unfolds, you're going to find offerings for the congregation, the ruler, and the people. So when you take a closer look at it, I think verse 2 kind of clears up verse 3 kind of clears up what he's talking about and specifically who he's talking to. We're going to find if the priest that is anointed do sin, okay? So it looks like he's keying in on someone in the priesthood sinning, okay? And we're going to get to the people down toward the end of the chapter, and we've talked about the people before. So one of the things, too, that's required of the leadership, if you will, of the worship, and I'm not looking at the laity or the congregation of Israel at large, I'm just looking at the leadership structure. If they sin, are they required to make a sin offering? Yes. And that sin offering is to be done by what? Another anointed priest that is without sin. So God makes a preparation here that even the leadership can be engaged in sin. And we know that to be true, don't we? No one's above sin. A lot of things happen in people's lives a lot of times that they get caught up in or do or things of that nature. So it's something to be cognizant of, the fact that a lot of times we want to apply it strictly to the laity or the congregation, if you will, but it applies too to those in leadership. Actually, if you look at it, and I'll say it like this, Morgan, probably more so, maybe. Why? Because of that word leadership, right? The standard is pretty tough, you know? That's not to say it's any less for anybody else, but when somebody's in leadership, what does that mean? They're leading the people, right? So there you are, Daniel. You know that, Ryan. You know that. Management like that. It's you're the figurehead, right? So, but God made allowances in this, even for the priest that was sin. So, Morgan, have you got? Read down through verses 5 through 9.
Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and bring it to the tabernacle of meeting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary. And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of meeting. And he shall pour the remaining blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. He shall take from it all the fat of the bull as a sin offering, fat that covers the entrails and all the fat which is on the entrails, 2 kidneys and the fat is on them by the flanks, and the fatty lobe attached to the liver above the kidneys he shall remove.
Okay. All right. So there we have what is if the priest sins, what is required to be done on this. And we see it very similar to the sin offering in general, about the young bull being brought has that offering. So what do we glean out of some of this maybe as we look at it? Well, the first thing is, who's giving these instructions? Well, the Lord's giving these instructions, isn't he? So, and he's given them to Moses, the intercessory that has become the intercessory between the people and God. So, very important that these instructions be given. Today, how are we given instruction? Through the Word. Hebrews chapter 1 tells us that, in times past, in various ways, God did speak to the prophets and the fathers, didn't he? But today, he says, he has spoken unto us, I think verse 2, by his dear Son. So, brings up a question. Since he's spoken to us, as plurality, by his dear Son, has he spoke to me? Has he spoke to you, Daniel? He has, hasn't he? Individually? Nope. Through the Word. Through the Word. See how the perfection came into being, that this was given. And you do see it changing throughout the Old Testament. God dealt directly with the patriarchs and the heads of the households, didn't he? Then it filtered down through Moses, didn't it? And of course through the prophets. So as you can see, this dealing with mankind one-on-one was slowly going to be what? Done away with, wasn't it? Here again, the absorption, not a counting absorption, Daniel. The absorption was done in Jesus Christ, you see. The one spokesman now. For us all. That's why the word us is there. Spoken to all of us. You can claim to be this, that, or the other, but if you're not speaking it through the Bible, then it's no good. It's no good. So, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if a person sins unintentionally against any of the commandments of the Lord in anything which ought not to be done, and does any of them, that's what one translation says, unintentional. Another one, speaking to the children of Israel, saying, if a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord concerning things which ought not to be done, they shall do against any of them. So, what you have here is the thought of sin that takes place unintentional or through ignorance. And so we're going to take a little bit closer look at that because we're going to run into this again in chapter 5, okay? So what's he talking about there? You know, today, what do we talk about? And a lot of times you hear it in prayer. Now, maybe not so much anymore, but in times past, we ask God to forgive us of sins of commission, okay? That's sins that's carried out and acted upon, isn't it? But we also use the term forgive us of those sins of omission. That's sins that's committed a lot of times unbeknowingly or presumptuously on our part. So not an unusual concept here, okay, on this idea of what the writer is trying to get across to us. No, even the Apostle Paul himself said in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 13, KJV, who was before a blasphemer and a persecutor and injurious, but I obtained mercy because I did it ignorantly and unbelief. Okay? So Paul here is talking about he done things in an unlearned and unskilled manner. Can that still apply today, that we can still do things even after we became skilled and learned in the Word? Can we still do things in an unskilled manner or an unworthy manner? Yes, we sure can. So, you know, a lot of times here again, a lot of this, and Jeff, I really don't want to get into word studies because that can take up a lot of time within itself, because you have to go back and look at the idea they had in mind then, how it's been applied in history, and how we apply it today. And I'll use a simple word conversation. We could use the word hell that's used in the King James Version. That's all kind of various thoughts based on context of that word, but we'll just use conversation, okay? Back in the old times, the word meant your whole manner of lifestyle. Today, when we say it, he's talking about his speech. Yes, speech is a part of your lifestyle, but it's not all of it. Whereas in the old times, it was all of it. Today, you know, we just look at it like, well, that's him talking. Well, so where's the application at? Well, it's your whole manner of life, including your speech, okay? Or your speech, including your whole manner of life. Let's put it like that, kind of get the cart turned around. So, Paul said he done this in an unskilled and unlearned manner, okay? I don't know, for some reason, and it may be, as kids, we use that word, has slang, it has a derogatory comment. I guess that's one reason why I kind of harp on that word ignorance when I come across it in the Bible, is to have people understand that it's not a derogatory term. It was not structured to be. We use it that way a lot of times, but it simply means unskilled and unlearned. Primarily in context of the Bible, unskilled and unlearned in the Scriptures, or the way of God, okay? And that's what Paul is talking about here. But now when Paul realized, like these priests, when he realized that he had sinned, what did he have to do? Just ask God to forgive him and go on, and he was saved? No, when he realized that he was unskilled and unlearned, but now he has learned the Word of God, he had to take some action to get cleansed of that, didn't he? Okay? Same principle applies today. Acts 3:17, KJV. And now, brethren, what that through ignorance you did it, has did also your rulers. Okay? Talking about what happened to Jesus. You were unskilled and you were unlearned in the Scriptures. Well, is that an excuse when we get to the judgment? Well, Lord, I didn't know. Don't apply, does it? That's just like getting a traffic ticket or something and have to go before the judge. Well, Judge, I didn't know I was supposed to drive 55. I thought it was okay to drive 75. I didn't know. Reed, you know what he's going to say to you? 250, please. Next case, Your Honor. Right? There's no excuses. Okay? Because it's our responsibility to know. And so, I want to kind of talk about that a little bit in lieu of what we're talking about today. This root word, the Hebrew translated unintentionally, has the idea to wander or to get lost. Now, that's another thought pattern. To wander or get lost. And we can do that, can't we? You see, as these word studies unfold, how it begins to encompass a whole lot more than what we normally think of that word, okay? And we know the New Testament talks about that we can wander or to get lost. We can go astray, you know. And you know, maybe sometimes we can go astray unintentionally because we don't necessarily understand the full meaning of what the Bible is telling us. But when we go astray, and we realize that we've gone astray, like the priests, they were anointed, they were in the church, okay? But if they go astray, what did they have to do? Repent, didn't they? And do a sacrifice, didn't they? So, what's changed today? Kind of interesting that when you stop and really look at what's going on with what God is doing here to prepare these people and to prepare for the future, you see. In verses 3 through 13, we find the priest, and we talked about that. That seems to be what he's talking about here because it's going to get down into the people, and you're going to see that again in chapter 5. The priest that sinned. Seen this before, hadn't we? To bring a young bull, right? Bring it to the door of the tabernacle, okay? Not inside yet. Inside the curtain, inside the slaughter. Lay his hand upon the young bull's head. We've seen that before, hadn't we? And we talked about that in detail about laying the hand on the young bull's head. That signifies that that individual's sins was being transferred from him to the bull. The bull would become the sacrifice, okay? You're going to find when we get over further in all this that even this word here, laying on of hands, carries with it an idea of strongly laying on of hands. In other words, it was more of a pushing method, a firm method, not just haphazardly touching, that you firmly put that bull or pressed on that bull to transfer those sins. So, seems like it was a matter of today. We sing the song, "Wholly Lean on Jesus' Arms," right? On the Word. Ryan, you're a song leader, not me. I'm just, up here off the cuff, okay? So, it would make sense then if you look at that lay and in other light and other passages, pressing against that bull, wholly leaning. What do? You're transferring the sin, aren't you? Kind of a shadow, maybe, a thought. But so, lay his hands upon the bull's head. Kill the bull. Okay? And some question, a thought come up about that last week or maybe the week before last, I can't remember. That happened beyond 5 minutes ago. So I'll just comment on that very briefly. Kill the young. It seems like when you go back and read this in detail that the person that is offering the sacrifice initiated the first blow or slit to the throat, if you will, of this. And the priest completed that process. signifying that that person had to do what? Even though he had transferred that sin, what did he have to signify?
Shedding of blood.
Yep, putting it to death, didn't he? Shedding of the blood. Okay. So when you look at it real close, that seems to be how this was transferred from the individual now to the priest. They did the preparation part of it, of the sacrifice. Catching of the blood, let's say, the bucket, a basin, or whatever it was, applying it, cutting the sacrifice up, putting it into pieces. The structure of the word was left to the priesthood, wasn't it? Well, we know today that that part of it is no longer so. The structure of the word is not entrusted to only the priesthood, but we all today are what? Priests and kings in the kingdom. So it's entrusted to us, really. Our sacrifice is entrusted to us, okay? So that seems to be the pattern that this followed. Y'all have to excuse me. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do the class this morning. I was so full of congestion and hoarse yesterday and last night till I didn't think I was going to make it. Eric, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, okay? So I'm going to try to make it on through it and made it this far. So anyway, any of you brother have any comment on that so far? Right.
I think it's very important to note that God is making special mention of the fact that priests can also sin.
Yep.
Unintentionally or however, priests are not above reproach.
Right.
They are just human as well.
Right.
And I think it's important that God had Moses put that in the record so that
Yeah.
the people would also know.
Right. I mean, so, if that be the case, then if the people were doing what they're supposed to be doing and the priest wasn't, could they question the priest's action? Because if they don't, you're going to find out, and that's how chapter 5 starts off. If you know of a sin, or you hear the whisper of a swear or an oath that's not true, guess what you as an individual or the congregation have an obligation to do?
And also for the priest to know as well, hey, we're not infallible here.
No. And I'm going to bleed that over into the New Testament a little bit, and this is a Bible study, okay? All right, so one of the things it says, and I've often thought about this, it says one of the qualifications of an elder is a man without reproach, right? I don't know about that statement. I think an elder should live a life that is acceptable and right, but is he still a man that's subject to sin? Yeah, I think we have to be careful sometimes about that. Well, you can't question him. He's an elder. No. I think if you're not careful, now you're getting into Catholicism and denominationalism, okay? So I think there's a line there where we take things sometimes and we apply it and we run off the deep end with it. You follow what I'm saying? I'm not without reproach. I'm human, okay? So when you see the term elder associated, don't think that I'm without reproach and I'm somehow acting in lieu of God, because I'm not, okay? I can fight, but the congregation has deemed that the elders, me and Jeff in this case, are of such status that we are worthy to do this, okay? But without sin, I can't go that far with it, okay? So, and right, that may be where you was leading to. That may have been some of your thought too, kind of going that way. Not really? Okay. Okay. And so we had things being instructed at what the priest that sinned would do. Now, what about, could any priest just do it? No. It had to be an anointed priest to do it, okay? Someone that has been set aside for this particular purpose and plan. So, what was he to do? Well, he was to bring the blood then to the tabernacle, sprinkle the blood 7 times before the veil of the sanctuary. Thought that was kind of interesting. That separated the veil of the sanctuary, separated the holy place from the most holy place, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Blood on the horn of the altar, sweet incense. Can you see that when a priest sins, and it's like in some of the other sins God has designated, that not only does he corrupt himself, but he corrupts the worship. Did you notice that? That's what this is about. Notice this blood's being applied inside the holy place. Okay? It's kind of interesting that he would tie that in together with that. And pour the blood that's left at the altar of the burnt offering. So that blood was poured out where he was going to do the burnt offering. Though God made a distinction between sins unintentionally done and those things done presumptuously, here again you have to look at the big picture in this, Numbers 15:30. And we'll get there. I don't want to jump here because we can get bogged down in this. Those done presumptuously has in Numbers 15:30, a sin against any of the commandments of God had to be dealt with. And this seems to be the same principle of James 2:10. So these sin has to be dealt with, is what he's getting at here, no matter who it is. Priest, person, whatever the structure is, okay? So, this word presumptuous seems to carry with it failing to observe the limits of what is permitted or appropriate. So, kind of like what we say about sin today is miss the mark, right? You know, or you've added to the word, or you've taken from the word, and things of that nature, okay? You fail to observe those limits of what is permitted and not permitted, you know. It's just like this morning, you know, I'm going to use the Lord's table here. We've got multiple containers here for the bread, haven't we? Well, if a congregation so deemed it, would it be wrong for them to have a basket here and have the bread in it? You know, maybe it's a larger basket and a larger piece of bread, and they break it, you know, bless it and break it and pass it out. Anything wrong with that? No. So you know, that's still within the limits, isn't it? The same way with the cup. You know, we have multiple containers here, but do we have to have 4 containers? Could we just have one big one with the cups in it and like that? Is that violating anything? No. And I've actually seen congregations that use a basket instead of plates. Okay, well, you're supposed to use a plate, Daniel. The Bible says you use a plate. Really? Yeah, my preacher said that's what you always use is a plate. You can't use a basket anymore. Well, now who's saying that? If you don't know, you'll fall for that hook, line, and sinker, won't you? We've always used a plate. They never used plates. Really? Fragments that were taken up in a basket. What? Really, if you look at it, I don't see a clear indication of where they had plates. I'm sure they did, but if you really want to boil it down, okay? You use the means that you have to carry out the specific command, don't you? Okay? And I'm just using that as a minor thing, but you can see how that will take you off into rabbit holes you don't want to go down, okay? If you're not careful. So, anyway. Sin. Sin is an offense against the holiness of God. And so the veil guarding his holy presence must receive sacrificial blood. What do we remember about God? What can't stand before the face of God? Sin. What separates us from God? Sin. So you have a priest carrying out these commandments of God, let's say, and maybe he's violated these commandments of God. Nothing is done about it. So when he goes into the holy place, what happens? He's bringing sin into that holy place, isn't it? Can an individual bring sin into the church? Yeah. Same principle. Nothing's changed. And so that blood had to be applied inside there on the veil. This blood had to be sprinkled 7 times before the Lord, before the veil or curtain that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies. This showed the seriousness of even unintentional sins for the priest. Kind of think about unintentional sins as things that happen on spur of the moment sometimes. You don't mean for it to happen, but it happened, you know. But when you realize it's happened, what do you have to do? And there can be things that are unintentionally done that you didn't know about because you're unskilled and you're unlearned in the Word of God. But when you learn about them, you make the correction, don't you? Okay. Kind of a thought on that. We can go into that deep well. Okay. And a lot of this is. The sevenfold sprinkling was also a part of the Day of Atonement, the purification of the leper, and the dedication of the altar. So, not unusual to find this number 7 or the sevenfold being used. Whether the blood fell on the veil or not, we're not certain. But we have good reason to believe that it was cast upon the veil itself. The veil of costly tapestry would become by degree more and more like a vesture dipped in blood. So that's kind of what it's looking at, a foreshadow of what was to come. So that is one thought on it, okay? Uh-oh. There you got a question. What about that number 7? You know, we see that used over and over in the Bible, and I think when we did the study on Exodus, maybe it was, I passed out a sheet on Bible numerics and the meaning of it, and I even said we might even do a little study on it, but I don't think we ever did. So, but anyway, might get to that sometimes because numerics in the Bible have a significant meaning, okay? It's like prophecy of what's to come. So what does this 7 denote? What's so special about that? Well, the number denotes completeness or perfection, without spot, without blemish. So who would that apply to? Well, the number 7 in the Bible means completeness or perfection, both physical and divine. It is based on the story of God creating the world in 6 days and resting on the 7th day. That's kind of where the thought of it comes in at, being divine and holy because of what God did in the beginning. It is also sometimes referred to as God's number, as only He is perfect and complete. You know, a lot of times we use that word perfect in our everyday language, don't we? And I've often used this analogy because a lot of times that's where you find it, especially in arts. A painting will be painted and it's being looked at. It's painted by a well-renowned artist, and you walk up and look at it, and the colors and the blend and the structure and the strokes and all are just what they're supposed to be. And you say, that painting is perfect. If you look at these blocks laid in this building, everyone who done it done a really good job, almost to perfection. But if you look at it from a different angle, I can tell you those blocks are not totally straight and square. If you look at any brick structure that's laid, looking at it straight on, it may look like it's supposed to be, but it's just about humanly impossible to get each of those blocks perfectly square. When you look down it this way, you can see that. Even though we use the word perfect a lot of times in our language, that painting, even though as great as it is not perfect. It's not without spot and it's not without blemish. Because if you take a closer look at it, maybe walk up to it or whatever, maybe you have your glasses off and you put your glasses on, one of the things you'll start to notice is brush overlays, brush strokes and overlap, colors that slightly overlap. So what do we mean about perfection in our everyday lives? I got to ring that buzzer for the first time. What we mean by that is that it is complete and full, well-balanced and rounded, okay? It contains all the key ingredients to make it what it needs to be. Does that mean it is in perfection, without spot and without blemish? No, only God is. So that's the only one we can say is perfect. So there again, that's a play on words. Now what about this hide and stuff that we're fixing to get into? And Jeff, I'll have to continue this next week. Jeff, do you have chapter 4, beginning at verse 10?
Just as these are taken from the altar of the sacrifice for peace offerings, and the priest shall burn them on the altar of the burnt offering. But the skin of the bull and all its flesh, and its head, its legs, its entrails, and its dung, and all the rest of the bull, he shall carry outside the tent and to a clean place, to the ash heap, and shall burn it up with fire and wood. And the ash heap shall be burned up.
Okay, you can stop right there. Okay, so here's some more instructions about what to do with the parts of the bull. Notice something about this, and we're going to look at it very quickly. The bull's hide and all its flesh, burn it on wood with fire. The valuable hide and meat of the bull. Now, I want you to stop and think about that. This sacrifice is without blemish and without spot as far as concerned, right? No cuts, gashes, or anything like that. No cross-contamination of any kind, right? How valuable is that hide? Even today, how valuable would that hide be? Okay? What about that prime meat? How valuable would it be? You know, God's already told the priests that there's certain parts they can keep, right? Some of the meat they could keep, some of the, that's how they had their livelihood. But notice on this, it's all going to be burned up. Now, that's different, isn't it? Wait a minute, Jeff, you going to burn up all this valuable hide and this meat? Man, this will bring on the Arab market. Man, we can get number of shekels for this, can't we? That's not what God wants. Why? Why is that? The valuable hide and meat of the bull were burnt outside the camp, meaning it was considered part of the refuge and waste that God did not want in the camp. He put this particular sacrifice now, he put the hide and the meat in the category of being worthless. Remember what's happened here now. This is a sin offering for the priest. Okay? So what is it to us? It could not be offered to God, but it was burnt as if it was a worthless thing. This had to be done outside the camp to show that the effects and memory of this sin were removed from the people. You know, we talked today about removing all sin and lust and greed. Well, this is for the physical form of it. That which is valuable is done away with. Tangible things are of no value to God. Okay. All right, now. So what does this do? All selfish motives had to be removed in the sin offering. If a priest brought the offering, the whole offering had to be destroyed. If a non-priest brought the offering, the priest could eat of it, but not the one bringing the sacrifice. And I thought that was real interesting. As he dropped that in there, we'll clear that up probably a little bit more in chapter 5, okay? There's some overlap in this. You couldn't bring a sin offering because you wanted meat or leather. Well, you know, I got to offer this sin offering to God, and I got to kill. I'm going to kill this bull anyway because I got a good offer from them Arabs on his hide and on his meat. I just let that be it. That comes back to Ananias and Sapphira, doesn't it, Ryan? In the heart, okay? That's what God is getting at here. You couldn't bring a sin offering because you wanted meat or leather, but only because you wanted to be made right with God. This emphasized that there is no benefit to our sins. He did not want that in his sacrifice. And I'm going to have to stop right there and get ready for the worship service. So we'll pick this up next week at verse 13.
He says, 2 times
Huh?
that it shall be totally burned.
I couldn't hear you.
He said 2 times it would be totally burned. It means he wanted it gone.
Right, exactly. Right, yeah, right. It's,
No less.
well, what did Paul say? Mortify the sins of the flesh, Colossians chapter 3. That means put to death. Does that mean part of it or all of it? Why did he tell the children of Israel to go down and utterly destroy all the oxen, people, man, woman, child, roosters, biddies, chickens, turkeys? Why did he tell them that? That's all of the sin gone, right? He considered what those people had touched even sinful. So anyway,